All right, now we're starting and we're streaming. I love it. All right, the
We're
dual
official
effect,
now. It's
the
official.
dual effect here. Yeah, happy to do a quick intro. So, Ben Suttles, one of the co-founders and president of Disrupt Equity, started back in 2017 with a guy named Ferris Musa. We were both born and raised here in Houston, Texas, where we're currently at and where we're currently headquartered at. We both lived all throughout the country. Like I was saying earlier, before everything started, I lived in California and New Mexico and a couple other places. But, made my way back here in, 2009 after doing corporate sales and, did that, up until a few years back, actually. But I got into real estate in 2013. And it was really just a function of, and you guys have probably heard this, maybe you've even read the book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Right. And so, it was, Lillian, who was my daughter, her mother was pregnant with her at the time. And as everybody kind of knows that as children, you got a lot of time on your hands. And you can only put the baby's room together so many times before you just kind of start getting bored of that. So you got to find some other stuff to do. So I was always interested in real estate. And so I was just soaking it all up. And podcasts were still around in 2013. So don't get me wrong, I'm not that big of a dinosaur, but I'm more of like to hold it in my hand and read books type guy. And so I was just, reading up a lot of this. And the one that really was a light bulb for me was Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki, who I now know. It's interesting to kind of have the full circle of things. But, bottom line, it got me thinking, what was I missing out on? The power of real estate, the power of leverage, and ultimately, syndication too, right? And using other people's money. Because even when you're raising money from a private lender, if you're in the single family world, you're still raising money, and so it's a little bit of a different thing. You're not selling shares. I get it. So it's not a 1-for-1 similarity, but you're still getting cash from somebody else. So it's other people's money that you're using to buy into real estate, at a bigger scale. And so I did some flips, did some rentals, did some wholesaling. It was all here in Houston. And about, it wasn't even 2 years, I think I got burned out on it. And just decided, hey, I love the concept of real estate, but I don't love it wasn't scalable in my world. There was a lot of stress to it, especially on the flips. And ultimately, I was still doing my W-2 corporate job, man. I mean, you can only run around and flip houses. I mean, luckily I was a sales guy, so I didn't have to come to the office all the time, but it's still tough when you're having to do your real job and then also try to keep up and build a portfolio too, and deal with contractors and tenants and all this other crap that kind of goes into all this, right? So after about 2 years, got burned out of that. So fast forward to like 2014, 2015, joined a group here in Texas where I learned about multifamily. And it was kind of a little light on the education piece, but it was great on the networking piece. I met a lot of great guys and gals in that group. I learned how to raise equity, learned how to underwrite deals, ultimately met a lot of vendors that some of which I still use to this day in that group. And, really kind of got off, on the right footing, because of it, and ultimately ended up buying my first deal within that group too. Ultimately had a difference of opinions with the head of the group, and we parted ways in 2016, and I was out on my own for a while. And then I was doing a meetup here in town. Being that I came from corporate sales, I knew the power of networking and marketing and brand building. And so, knowing that I wanted to continue to go down this path of getting into multifamily syndication, and beefing that up, I knew I needed to kind of keep my pulse on people that were doing deals. So, creating a meetup is a very low bar threshold thing that you can do. It doesn't cost a lot of money. So I was doing that on my own for quite a while. Ferris ended up coming out to the meetup. We ended up meeting, becoming friends at first. He was coming from kind of the single family world, tech as well. He was a Microsoft guy. And, ultimately, we decided to partner up. And so that was where Disrupt Equity was born. And so that was 2017. We went on a tear for the next couple of years after that, buying up a lot of stuff here in Texas. We bought up a lot of stuff in Atlanta. We ultimately had a lot of challenges with our property management companies that we were using. These third-party management companies can be tough to deal with. And, we ultimately decided to create what's called Disrupt Management now, which is our property management company, in 2019.
Hmm.
So we took over our own portfolio. We've since now kind of expanded. We do third-party management with that. And that's just an ongoing business. So, fast forward to, today, and we got 175 employees, 700 million in assets under management. I bought and sold 5,100 units at this point. We've got 3 development deals that we're doing, 2 here in Houston, 1 in Atlanta. That's going to be a big kind of focus of ours as we kind of move forward. I think that, we're going to go from one side of the cycle where there was a ton of product getting dumped onto the market, and, probably the most units that we've ever seen in history, to the least amount of units in almost a matter of a year or two. And so we see that there's some opportunity to maybe do some new development in certain parts of the country, because you're not going to have to compete with a bunch of guys because they're just not doing deals. So doing that, that has since, spurred other businesses and other ventures that we're currently doing. Insurance is one of them. We have about 60,000 units that we insure here in Texas and Oklahoma. And that was just a partnership of somebody that I've just known for almost 10 years now in the commercial real estate world. And so having a lot of fun. There's obviously a lot of stress and risk involved. I always tell people that are listening, like, what we do is not easy. It's not without stress. It's not without risk. You do have to have some level of money. You can't get into this like no cash down crap. That's not how this works. The lenders aren't going to lend to you. Investors probably ain't going to invest with you if you don't have any skin in the game. So I always tell people, have at least a little bit of money. I wish it wasn't necessarily that way, but we're talking about big dollars here, and I can see where everybody's coming from, having a little skin in the game. So, looking for our next opportunity. We own and buy in Texas, Georgia, and Florida. We love the Carolinas. We love Tennessee. So just think Texas and the Sun Belt. Yep. And, my role these days has evolved. I mean, when we first started, me and Ferris did absolutely everything. Some stuff I did well, some stuff I didn't do so well. But to this day, I'm president of Disrupt Equity, and I handle the asset management part of our portfolio. I handle the acquisitions part of our portfolio, and then I handle the investor relations, which is the capital raise and everything that comes in after that. So I've got a good team, really, really excited. That's allowed me to kind of, go and do some different things and, just support them and manage them. So my role has evolved and changed a little bit over the years, but, we're still going to be net buyers for the year. I think, people right now need to understand, there's some interest rates, there's some inflation, there's some uncertainties in the market. I get it. Right. But if you can underwrite to a 6 or 6.5% rate and 55 to 60% leverage, and your deal still works, why wouldn't you buy it? Things just change. You got to adapt. Yep. People are always trying to time the bottom or time the market. Like if I just wait, there's going to be more blood in the streets. Well, I'm going to tell you right now, there's already blood in the streets, and the brokers are desperate for people to put offers in on this stuff. And we're seeing stuff at 10, 20, 30% discount over what it would have been 12, 18 months ago. So I always tell people, if you're new to the market, get yourself educated, network, then start making offers, start underwriting deals, because it's gonna just ramp up from here. I don't think there's going to be a tsunami of deals like there was in the great financial crisis, but I think that there's going to be some great strategic opportunities. And if you don't get up to bat, you're never going to be able to hit a home run. That's just how I always tell it to people. And so we find ourselves putting in offers. We put in 10 offers last month, which is down probably roughly 60% from the year prior to that, but we're still in the game. So, that is my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that, my friend. And it's an honor to have you on, and it's an honor to get to meet you, especially a guy who started from Rich Dad Poor Dad. Myself and Joe, we listened to the Rich Dad Poor Dad probably 4 or 5 years ago, so we're a little farther behind in the journey than you. That's cool that you know Robert. I got to meet him here in Arizona. To all the way now to 700 million assets under management, 150 employees. That's freaking awesome. So you already told a lot of the story of why someone would consider investing with you, right? I mean, you guys are big players in this. Tell us a little about the opportunity. I was told about a Texas 3-pack, and that's something that we had told our investors about. If you wouldn't mind giving some details about that one, and why, these investors, right, they have skin in the game. We're only talking to people who have money and know that they're going to invest, right? So tell them why it's going to be a great opportunity to consider working with you.
Well, again, I mean, it's an investment, does not come without any risk. So take everything that I say with a grain of salt. It's only for informational purposes only. All right, I got to get that out of the way, right? So it is for marketing purposes. We called it the Texas 3-pack. So it's 3 different deals here in Texas. 2 are in Houston, 1 is in Austin, right? So big major metros, and that's typically we've played in secondary markets before, done really, really well. We've now shifted all of our focuses to primary markets. So when you're talking about that here in Texas, you got Houston, you got DFW, you got Austin, you got San Antonio. It's 4, right? So we're hitting 2 of the 4 markets with this deal. They're cross collateralized as part of a CMBS loan, and we are assuming the seller's loan, right? And so bottom line, they've got a 3.8% fixed rate for the next 7 years. Interest only on the loans, not amortizing. And ultimately, you're not going to get anything close to that in the market right now. You're probably at best at 5.8. That's at best, right? But we're not coming in highly levered. We're at about 60% LTV on the loan itself, in comparison to where we're buying it at. And there's plenty of upside. We're going to be putting about $6 million in value add kind of CapEx construction into these properties. Between sprucing up the exteriors to adding and upgrading amenities to ultimately doing unit renovations and making sure we're bringing those up to market and to really up to our standard, which is, fairly specific, stainless steel appliances, tile backsplash, gooseneck faucet, the rub bronze, fixtures, the whole shebang, right? Really trying to elevate the look and feel of these properties. And then therefore you're going to attract higher paying residents, right? But they're in high growth markets of being Houston and Austin. The 2 Houston assets are 15 minutes from our offices right here. We know the Katy one, which is in a submarket of Houston, very, very well, because one of our new developments is literally right around the corner from one of the deals. So from the second floor balcony, I can see our new development, about a quarter mile away. So we know this pocket. We've done a lot of studies and understand traffic counts and, what kind of growth they're going to see because of the new development. And so we're right around the corner from there. The other one's in a submarket called Stafford, which is just another kind of growing, submarket of, a suburban market really of Houston. And, they both got, good median income. It's got good school districts. It's got good crime scores. So those are the 2 Houston deals, right? Then you shift kind of gears to the Austin deal. It's a property called Treehouse. It's in the Riverside submarket of Austin. And we happen to have a deal that's 3 minutes away from here. So again, we know this pocket very, very well. We are already managing in that area. We have economies of scale. And then we have another property that we own that's probably more like 7 to 10 minutes away. And then we manage several other deals in the Austin area. So we've got great teams in these different markets. These are markets that we know. These are markets that we own in. These are markets that we manage in. And everybody kind of knows the story of Houston. I mean, Houston over the next decade or throughout this decade that we're currently in is going to be number 2 on population growth for, until 2029 or 2020 or 2030. And really over the next 3 years, it's supposed to be number 1. And so you've got a ton of people moving here. There is a ton of growth, a ton of jobs, a ton of businesses relocating to this area. And it's because you got a good quality of life. Besides the 108 degree, temperature, that's the only bad thing about it.
Only a few months of the year.
Yeah, I can't control what happens during the summer, folks. Yeah. But, ultimately it's low cost of living, great schools, well-run city, there's a lot going on here. And it's not just an oil and gas honky tonk, folks. Do your research. Houston's very diversified in comparison to the 1980s. We've got tech, we got manufacturing. We have the biggest medical center in the entire world is here in Houston. And so people don't realize how big medical is here in Houston as well. And so, there's a lot of kind of white collar jobs. And as anybody that knows how real estate works, those white collar jobs feed into blue collar jobs and gray collar jobs. And those are going to be where our residents are going to be living, right? Those are going to be the people that we're going to go after. And so, that's Houston. Obviously, a lot of people that probably maybe don't know a lot about Houston. Everybody's heard about Austin, right? Not only is it home to the University of Texas, which is one of the biggest schools in the country, if not the biggest, The tech scene is huge there. There's a lot of manufacturing. That's where Tesla moved. That's where Elon Musk loves, and there's just a ton of growth, around that sector, manufacturing, tech, logistics, all in that kind of central Texas area. And then we really, really love the 5 to 10-year horizon on Austin, especially, and so, and again, what I want to stress to people is I'm not playing in that A market. Right. So people are gonna be like, well, didn't a lot of things get built there? And this and that. We're not playing in that market. This is workforce housing, right? The stuff was built in the one in Austin was built in the 1980s. The one here in Katy was built in 1999, and the one in Stafford 2001. So these are more workforce housing plays. We're going to put a lot of money into them. We're going to increase the value over time. And that's our bread and butter. That is what we built our career on.
But those
And
are still
so
great vintage assets, though. You're not dealing with a lot of the older.
they're not. Yeah, I mean, we tend to try to shy away from the 60s and 70s stuff. I'm not saying that there's you can still, trust me. If somebody gave me a deal, I'd probably still buy one. It's like an addiction for me. The problem is you're when you look at risk adjusted, and I think that's this misconception in the market is that what does risk adjusted mean?
Yeah.
Right. I'm saying if I'm giving you a 17% IRR on a deal that was built in 2001 versus a 17% IRR deal built in 1967, right? Which deal are you going to take?
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to take the 2001 because not only it's going to be, 30 years newer, right? And so you're going to have less maintenance issues, but it's going to attract tenants and residents that are going to probably pay more because it's going to look nicer. It's going to look more modern. Right. There's a tendency with the 60s and 70s stuff that is the lowest rung. And it's unfortunate, right? They're just not building this stuff anymore. And we have an affordability problem in this country, but that's what you're going to attract, right? Is the truly kind of the socioeconomic, is going to be different than something that was built in 2001. And so I can justify my rent pops a little bit more, especially when I put the money into it. And so, we raised $57 million on it.
What's
we
your
have great
leverage on that, Ben?
It's roughly about 60% LTV is what we ended up doing. Yeah, and we're not obviously escrowing any of this. It's all money that we're bringing to the table, so none of it's escrowed. So it's not an LTC type situation. So,
Nice.
We bought it for 110 million, portfolio price, and it's 673 units. So I think it comes out to 150, 160 a door. I don't remember the exact math on it. And so, ultimately it gives us some more economies of scale in these markets, which allows us to continue to control our costs and ultimately buoy up the markets that we're already in, right? And so, we're pretty much done with the cap raise on it. It was a little bit of a process doing the CMBS loan assumption. It was not something that my firm or me had personally ever done. And for anybody that's looking to do it, I'm just going to suggest that maybe you look for a little bit easier of a deal because it takes a long time. We've had this thing under contract since March, and we'll be closing in the next 2 or 3 weeks. We still haven't gotten a definitive date just yet, and that's because a lot of this stuff just continues to linger, right? But just a little bit of an education for people that don't know, CMBS it's all ultimately there's the original lender who was Morgan Stanley in this sense, and then they sold off the paper. Right. And so there's a bond holder. We still don't even know who that person is. They're always cloaked in mystique behind the curtain type people. Right. But they'll have a master servicer that's servicing the loan. Then you have the bond holder that holds the paper. Right. Then you have also a third party, which is the credit rating agency. So think Moody's, think Fitch, those types of guys also have to rate the quality of the bond. And to rate the quality of the bond, they also need to know who's going to be owning the bond, right? Or who's going to be running the bond on behalf of the bondholder, which would be us, right? And so they're determining not only the health and quality of the property in the submarket, but they're also determining the health and quality of us, right? So they're vetting us as much as the bondholder or the master servicer ever did. So these 3 different entities, and they all have different questions. They all have their own approval process. They all have their own approval timeline. And you have to get all of them together, and all of them all have to say yes, and then you can close. So we're down to just getting the credit rating agency to say yes, and we'll be able to get this thing closed out. But biggest single purchase that we've ever had, biggest single raise that we've ever done. And, you know, and I think, you know, ultimately they're going to be successful or have a fair amount of CapEx and reserves on the deal. So I feel very well about the long-term, you know, health of the properties.
Hmm.
But the closing process and the lending and the loan has been tough on that one.
What's like the remainder on that debt?
The remainder on the debt, well, I mean, it's interest only. So, right, you're not paying anything down. It's not
Right.
amortizing at all.
Right. You
You
have
know,
it for like, you say 5 to 10 years though, is how much longer you have that?
it was initially a 10-year term, right?
Okay.
There's 7 years left on it. And
Nice.
it's interest only throughout the term of the loan.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's incredible debt. Nobody's going to do that deal right now. You know, now I heard back in, you know, 2021 that people got that type of stuff, you know, locked in sometimes, you know, but this is pretty good even for that time frame.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
One question with that. So whether we have an opportunity to invest with you on this deal or the next, right? We're giving our investors an eye into Ben Suttles and Disrupt, and because we definitely want to invest with you very soon, if not in this deal. The one question that I have, and I've seen, you know, multiple articles in Houston of big operators that are foreclosing on their big apartment complexes, right? We both know Sandhya Seshadri, right? She just posted on Facebook that like 3 more properties were foreclosed on. You know, what are you guys doing different than what those companies did to essentially lose their properties in Houston? Yeah.
So, all right. I don't know him personally, but I know of him, and I'm not going to get into disparaging the guy on, especially on a live stream.
For sure.
You know, it was one guy, and it was, I think at this point it's been 5 or 6 deals that he's lost back to the bank, and it's a couple different lenders. He's also in a lawsuit for straight up fraud too. So, you know, all this is public knowledge, so I'm not saying anything that is my opinion. But
Yeah.
you know, the one thing that I will say is it wasn't Houston, it was the guy and
Fair.
his decision of which properties to buy and in what parts of town should you buy them. Well, I have the luxury of growing up here, and Houston's a very unique market. High growth, great, beautiful, love it. We've got the most green space of any major metro in the whole entire country. People don't realize that, but we really do. And so it's a great community, but you need to know what pockets to invest in.
Yeah.
And the gentleman that owned those properties was in very poor parts of town. You know, properties that were not only not going to get the rent growth, but were also going to get hammered by insurance. And ultimately, he took out very high levered loans, did not have enough reserves, was not vertically integrated, and was relying on third-party property management companies. I don't even think he even had asset management. I think the guy had 5, 6, 7,000 units, and he had like 3 people working for him. So
wow.
He was just almost a capital raiser that was trying to spin himself as some kind of an operator. When you're building out your portfolio, you're going to take 2 tracks, right? You're either private equity and you're trying to raise capital, or you're an operator and you're going to build this thing out. You're either going to have in-house management, or you're going to have in-house asset management. You're going to have construction in-house. You're going to have these things in-house because you're going to try to be looking for efficiencies, for economies of scale, control, right? Flexibility in your process, right? And this gentleman did not have that, right? You know, he had 1 lawyer and a couple of investor relations people, right? Because he was trying to raise money. So I will leave it at that. It definitely has nothing to do with Houston per se. Because there's a lot of people that are wildly successful here, right? You know, us being one of them. But unfortunately, he got national headlines because of, you know, the way that, you know, he operated. And I know Arbor, who was the one who took over the first batch of properties.
Yeah.
I mean, they're a national lender out of New York, and they loan a lot of money to a lot of people. And they were telling us that this guy went radio silent on them almost day one.
Wow.
So whenever you're having problems, you know, you're going to want to communicate with not only your investors, but your lender too. Hey, this is a situation, guys. Like, we got to restructure this. We got to work this out. We got to figure out but I want to make it work. This guy didn't do any of that. He just ghosted them.
Yeah.
And, so what do you think the lender's going to do, right? When you treat them like that, they're going to essentially just say, well, F you, we're going to take it to the courthouse steps and it's going to get sold off. And it did.
Yeah.
And ultimately it was a combination of the senior lender and the pref equity that took this guy out, because pref equity guys were getting waylaid too. They weren't getting paid. But the one thing I'm going to leave people with, right? Whenever you're investing with people, you're backing the jockey, not the horse. And I have 28 of passive investments on my own, right? And I invest with other people, not just here. Yes, I invest in all of our deals too, but I invest with other people, right? But what am I looking for? I start with the person, the firm, the company, the operator, the syndicator. That's the most important thing, right? Because I've seen great operators turn crappy deals good, and I've seen bad operators turn great deals bad. So just think about that, right? Then I'm looking at the submarket, right? Does it have growth? Does it low crime? Does it got good school districts? I love communities, so I like school districts, right? Because it's low turnover and families tend to stay there longer, right? Then I'm looking at the property, right? Because again, I can infuse $10 million in that thing. I can make that thing look beautiful. Beautiful. I cure every deficiency. I can make that thing look modern with enough money. But you can't control how much of a scumbag somebody is, and you ultimately can't fix the neighborhood.
Yeah.
You can have $100 million. It doesn't matter if the guy right next door, or the guy down the street is a slumlord, or you're in a pocket that has high crime and, low median income and just low growth. Right. So you start with the operator, then then the market, then the deal. And if you stick to just those things, right, and get a feel for people, pick up the phone. I mean, it's amazing to me that people would invest without actually talking to people, and I get it. There's some introverts out there, and, maybe you're not comfortable, right? But this is your hard-earned retirement funds, right?
Yeah.
It's important that you need to go have those phone calls, right? Understand their track record, understand how much skin in the game they're going to have, understand their business and entrepreneurial acumen, right? Because I'm not going to say, like, people come from various backgrounds. I mean, I was in sales, but I was also in management. My family, was a bunch of entrepreneurs too. My parents still own their own company. I kind of grew up. I know how a lot of this stuff works. And I'm not saying that you can't learn it, but at least I bring that to the table, right? Because ultimately, what are we doing? We're buying multifamily, but we're really buying a business.
Right.
And business has got employees, and it's got payrolls, and it's got expenses, and it's got all of these things and budgets. It's just a business.
Yep.
And you need to know how to run a business, and you need to know when to pivot if you need to pivot, right? And so, understanding that, and you can really only get a good sense of that by talking to somebody and asking the tough questions. I mean, shit, I wish that every single one of our deals was a home run.
Yeah.
It's not, and anybody that tells you that it is, and then I'm still paying all distributions, I'm hitting all my metrics right now, they're lying to you.
Yep.
They're lying to you, and so you need somebody that's going to be candid too. Say, hey, these are my two crappiest deals, and this is the reason why it happened. But here's what I learned from it. So I'm going to tell you, me and Ferris have made every single mistake in the book that you could possibly make in this business. I'm going to tell you guys one thing. I've never made that same mistake twice.
There you go.
I learn from every single mistake. I adjust. I adapt. Because at the end of the day, everybody's going to make mistakes. We're human, right? But if you don't learn from them, then that's the problem, right? And so anybody that tells you that the perfect bulletproof portfolio is doing great, never had any challenges, they're lying to you. And that should be a big, big red flag.
Yeah. This is why it's so valid and so appreciative that you came on today and you're able to do this for us, because, to your point, many of investors don't want to pick up that phone call and talk to someone. So this is great that you're able to share these things now so we can continue to share. And, it's unfortunate that a spotlight was shown on one investor, then a generalization was made about an entire market. And so people have a presupposition around that. So I'm glad that you're able to shed light on that. Let's talk about moving forward, the positives, the towards things for the next 2, 3, 5 years, specifically with what you're doing, or your opinion of the multifamily market in general. Let's talk about Houston and what Disrupt Equity is doing, and why, if I'm the average investor, I'm coming in and I know UPC, Upgrade Partners Capital, and I'm getting introduced to Ben. Tell me the reasons of why you're so, bullish on the next 3 to 5 years of everything?
I mean, I think it's already a little slow right now. So, right. I mean, and the reason that I had a good response on that Houston thing is it's not the first time I've been asked that question. So I didn't come up with that response on the fly, just so everybody knows. But all right. So shifting back to what is my thought process in the next 3 to 5 years. The fundamentals for multifamily have not changed, folks. The only dang thing that's changed is inflation has gone up, and it's driven some of the expenses higher. Insurance being a big splashy thing that we always talk about, and then interest rates, right? But I mean, again, if you can underwrite to where insurance is right now and where interest rates are right now, and that deal still makes sense for you and your investors, why not get in? I'm not saying to aggressively underwrite it to some 2021 number that's no longer legit. Underwrite it to the higher number. And if the deal still works, then it still works, because I'm going to tell you one thing. The fundamentals are still there. There's still a gap in supply and demand in these markets. And I'm talking about Texas and the Sun Belt. So I'm not taking a blanket statement across the country. And really, even within those markets, we all know that real estate is hyper local, right? So look at even sub-markets within those markets, right? Making sure that you're in the right pocket. So as long as you're in the right pocket, you're going to have the supply and demand imbalance, right? And what do I mean by that? That means that there's more people moving to these areas and needing housing than there's actual housing. So then what happens from there, right? Not only is it an interesting buy-sale type arrangement when you have that gap, but really between the landlord and the renter, you have some purchasing power, right? Because that means that if demand is high and the supply is low, right, you're going to be able to dictate a higher rent, right? So rent growth is going to occur. That's not going away. And in fact, in the Texas and the Sun Belt, it's getting worse, right? I think that I saw a statistic, maybe, and this was 6 months ago, granted, we were going to have a gap of like 4 million, units in the next 20 years. That's a lot. That means that in order for us to be within equilibrium on a supply and demand scale, that you have to build 4 million units in the next 20 years. It's never going to happen, right? And so you're always going to have that gap. And so that's one of the reasons why I love it. The other reason why I love multifamily is you get the hierarchy of needs, right? You've got shelter, food, water, right? And maybe I flip it. It's really water, food, probably shelter, right? But bottom line is that's why office is getting waylaid. We have an office. I actually love coming into the office, but you don't need to have an office anymore. You can do things like Zoom calls, right? You can have remote teams. And so that's not on the hierarchy of needs. But to have housing, you need to have that, right? And then we go back to the statistics of, the millennials are staying in, rental units longer, and boomers are downsizing into rental properties. And that's all just going to create additional demand for the lack of supply in multifamily. So all of these things is just a perfect storm of like statistics that are widely documented. I'm not coming up with any new statistic that hasn't been, named in the last 5 years. But the reason that multifamily is so hot is because it's true. And people that are smart know that, right? Including the big guys, so at the end of the day, over the next 20 years, I'm bullish on multifamily, right? Did I think that we probably needed to cull the herd a little bit? Yeah, absolutely. And I think that this high interest rate environment, this kind of more challenging operator environment that we're going to find ourselves in is going to weed out some of those people that were a little bit weaker. And it already started with the gentleman that we talked about earlier, right? And so what does that equate to in the near term, kind of 3 to 5 year period? I mean, I love Texas. I love Georgia. I love Florida. They're high growth markets. I think we'll ultimately be net buyers. We are trying to adjust our buying criteria to buy stuff a little bit newer and nicer, right? But that's more of a personal internal firm goal versus like that should be the strategy for everybody. But if you think about it, right, there's a flight to quality right now. Nobody wants that 60s or 70s deal. Those guys are getting hammered. And so those are going to be probably the opportunities, because there's going to be less people that are going to be demanding the buy of that, right? And so you're going to have a big supply of people that are coming out of floating rate interest rate debt over the next kind of 2 to 3 years, and they're not going to have a lot of buyers. So there's always an equilibrium, just like I said earlier on the call, right? There's always a deal at some price point, I'm going to buy it, even if it's in the hood. Sell it to me for 15 grand a door, I'm going to make money on that damn thing. So you're going to have not a tsunami, but a lot of sellers, not a lot of buyers, because everybody's either out of the market or there's a flight to quality and they're trying to buy newer assets. That's where there's going to be an opportunity if you're looking to get into the space, right? And you're still going to have rent growth. I mean, again, that's all based on the supply and demand of people moving in versus the amount of supply that's out there. So I think that's always still going to be there. So we're going to be probably net buyers. We're going to refinance, or we're in the process of refinancing a lot of our portfolio. We had floating rate debt too. 90% of the deals that got done last 2 years had it. So anybody that wants to say, oh, I had all fixed rate debt, those guys were just plain lucky, or they are too naive. They didn't even know what they're getting themselves into. But the one thing is, I've been in this market long enough that's probably going to come back to bite certain people too, right? Because it still has to fit your business model and your business plan, right? So if you're fixing your rate for 10 years and it's on defeasance or yield maintenance on the prepayment penalty, you're going to get waylaid on your whenever you go to sell that deal, and that's going to take it out of your proceeds. So just always tell people, be smart. There's a reason why a lot of these guys do shorter term debt. It's so they can quickly exit without getting $2-3 million prepayment penalty, which essentially comes out of your bottom line. So you just need to be smart about what is your exit strategy, what is your timeline, what are your investors expecting, and structure your capital stack accordingly. Don't just go with what the herd is telling you to do, right? Some of the stuff that we're in that we'll end up selling will be older, and then the newer stuff we're going to hold on to for a while. So I don't mind fixing that rate on a permanent loan, right? Whereas you shouldn't just do it because you're scared because CNN told you that interest rates are going up, right? And that's how some people are. And so, so I guess that's kind of my if I had a crystal ball and I was rubbing on it, told me actually what the future was going to say or was going to do. That's kind of what I think is going to happen. So take it for what it's worth.
So with people who may be watching this, people are saying, how do I get into the game, whether they go be operators themselves or to invest passively? For what reasons would you tell people to, like, if they don't have a ton of experience yet, want to continue to grow, income and grow their wealth with, multifamily investing, like, why would you say that investing passively, say with a fund of ours that's partnering with you, would be to their benefit versus them trying to go out and kind of build their own?
So people need to think internally and say, okay, do I want to create another job and career for myself? If you hate your job and you hate your career and you're just all in and you want to go build a commercial real estate firm, then by all means, start one up and do what I'm doing. But I live and breathe this every single day. This is not a hobby. I don't have a W-2 anymore. Like, this is, I burn the ships, folks. Mm-hmm. And so you need to tell yourself, and don't get me wrong, it could be wildly lucrative, but like I said earlier on the call, there's a fair amount of risk. There's a ton of stress. It's real estate's not like this. As much as I wish it was like a rocket ship, it's not, right? It's choppy, and over time it goes up, but it's choppy along the way. And you're going to have personnel problems, and you're going to have cash flow issues, and you're going to have this and that. Your lender, everybody's barking at you, whatever, right? If you'd much rather walk over glass than do something like that, then you should probably stick to passive investing. The only other thing that I would also say for passive investors too is also find, if you love your career, you want to invest, and maybe you're thinking that you can do this thing on the side, you really need to just understand work-life balance and how much time it's going to take. Like, I always use the example of a doctor, right? The doctor works 70 hours a week. He might have the skill set, he might have the smarts, he might even have the money to go out and do all this stuff on his own, but he works 70 hours a week. You shouldn't be doing this on your own, right? You need to be investing passively. So for people that love their career, don't have any desire to get in and be a full-time operator, passive investing is a great vehicle because it's literally in the name. It's passive, right? You're filling out, at least in our offerings, it's 4 pieces of paperwork and you're making a wire transfer. Yep. And then we want you at least to review the monthly financials, but you don't even have to do that. Some people don't even open up our emails. So, I mean, but that's fine. That's, again, it's a passive thing. Whereas active investing is you're in this, breathing this every single day. And, but yeah, you have to, again, it goes back to making sure that you're investing with people that you like, know, and trust. Investing into some markets that you believe in that have long-term growth, prospects, and then ultimately looking at the property. But, that's what I always tell people, like, think about what your quality of life is, what your work-life balance is, what you're really what is your end goal, and understanding that, it's not like tens of thousands of dollars in mailbox money every month either, right? You can make a couple $100 here, a couple $100 there. That's how it is. Right. Now over time, that will continue to build, but really where passive investors really make their big pop is when we go to exit these properties, right?
Right.
That's where you're going to get 50, 60, 70% of your gain, and so you also need to think about what cash flow needs do you need, and understand that, some investments might not be the right investment for you. And I'll give an example of that just so people are like, what the heck is he talking about, right? On a development deal, you're getting no cash flow. Why is that? Well, it's because there's nothing there, right? You're buying a piece of land and you're constructing the land, and it's going to take 2 to 3 years before people actually move in and start paying rent, right? And so for my retirees, the people that are living off their cash flow, I always tell them I wouldn't go into a development deal. Not only is it higher risk than just a traditional acquisition, right? Because there's a myriad of things that could happen along the way in the development cycle. You're not getting any cash flow for 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
And it might actually be 4 years. I mean, it might not be until you get it stabilized and you refinance that you finally are in a position where you can cash flow on that Class A new development deal. And so, you also need, as a passive investor, you also need to understand, what do you need? And also, I typically have my younger folks that will take on that risk and don't really need the cash flow because they're working professionals and they're already making good 6 figures. They'll do those types of deals, and then you'll have typically maybe some, the retirees or the folks that are kind of living off the retirement funds. They're going to want more cash flow. And then you'll have a combination of people in between, right? But that's, to kind of throw people into buckets. That's probably the best way to describe it. And so you need to think hard getting into these, and which side of the table do you want to be on?
Yeah.
And, I mean, that's why I invest passively too. It's nice to see somebody else do some of the work.
Yeah.
I mean,
don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm doing the work too, but I'm like, man, they found a great deal, like put some money into it, And so, and that was something at first I was, because I'm so type A, right? I had to kind of get over letting go of the reins and not being that investor that's asking 1,000 questions. And giving them some breathing room to go out and operate. So also think about that too, right? You want to be a good passive investor. I mean, not to say that you can't ask questions, but I also have people that they'll hammer you 20 questions every month, regardless of how well it's going or not. And so know that if you're so excited about it or so enthralled in the process, maybe you want to shift into doing your own deal, and then you'll be able to see it from that side of the lens too.
Definitely. Well, Ben, we appreciate you. I know we only said a half hour, we've almost gone to an hour. So we want to, honor the time that you give us.
Cool.
If people want to do you have platforms? Where can they find more information about you? Or
I mean, you can find a Disrupt Equity. I mean, we're all over social media. We've got a lot of stuff on YouTube, Facebook. I mean, we post a lot of free content. I mean, we like to do that because I think it's just, it's good to kind of give back and make sure people are doing the business the right way. We don't want it to end up like the guy here in Houston, right? Who wasn't even from Houston. He's from DFW, but he was investing in Houston. And then, ultimately, if you want to check us out on our website, www.disruptequity.com.
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah. Thank you, Ben. I've always appreciated you. And I mean, you've added a lot of value to me in the last, we've known each other, 4 or 5 years now since that trip to Aruba. And you've taught me a lot, really inspired me to kind of become who I am today with getting this fund up and going and getting deals done. So really appreciate you as a person and for jumping on, and, let's hopefully get a deal done here very soon.
Love you guys. No, I appreciate it.
Time.
Awesome. Thank you, sir.
All right, guys. Later.